Okay, Kids W. June. Nah, if the Lunatics Unleashed aren't there, guess what, buddy? I ain't either. Okay, how about June Meringue? That's got a lot of meat on its bones. Might finally get that guy to stop sending me death threats for not playing Huckleberry Hound in Hollywood Capers. Nah, never give the people what they want. Alright, this one's a surefire hit here. Juniversal! Nah, that name doesn't even make sense. But I'll tell you what I could get a few good years out of, that's the Food Net June work. Cook or be cooked, it's your time. Wait, I got it! Welcome to Stupid Collectible Crap June, a celebration of landfills everywhere. Now, when I was growing up in the early 2000s, there was no end to the amount of trading card and collectible games that were looking to muscle in on the turf that games like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Had managed to secure so heavily. Monsuno, Hot Wheels Ballistics, Gourmety, Beat-em-on, UB Funkies, Bionicles, Scanners, Botshots, Ninjago, Redakai, Kung Zu. We didn't like them, it was our job to like them. Do you think we liked buying little skateboards for our fingers? No, but it was our duty to launch a harassment campaign on our parents until we got one. When you look at the crop of early 2000s toys, there are two very clear big winners and another very strange loser. And for the whole of the month of June, I'm dedicating myself to looking back and discussing the rises, falls, and whatever comes between success and failure. It's time for me to show you my BBC. That's right, Bakugans, Beyblades, and Chaotix. First up in the Triangle of Terror is Bakugan. What if circles had an edge? Now, Bakugan as a game has existed for centuries. It just took until 2009 to make it cool. The game of marbles was first properly played sometime in the 1500s, with the rule set that would be adapted to modern day forming in the UK. Draw a circle, launch marbles at the center to knock other marbles out, whoever gets the most wins. The simple game has been a pastime on playgrounds, beaches, heck, pretty much anywhere with a flat surface has the potential to be a marbles court. As such, everybody knows how the game basically works. So why not expand it more, build more gamey elements into it, and make a collectible to encourage kids to buy loads of them? That was the idea of Aldrich Saussure, a toy designer and author who saw how well toys like yo-yos and marbles were still being stocked in Walmarts after hundreds of years, and wanted to innovate on one of them to see what could be done with modern technology. In combination with an idea to make tiny action figures for kids, Aldrich got to work on the idea for a larger-than-average marble that could unfold into a toy for kids to play with. His idea would go on to be pitched to the toy manufacturer Spin Master, who just so happened to be looking for a way to update the game of marbles into the new hotness. They were able to innovate further on Aldrich's idea by adding a magnet that would release the character inside whenever it came into contact with metal. Okay, so we have what would become Bakugan, but well, right now they're just a great way to keep shopping lists on the fridge, and Dragonoid could do so much more than that. So, Spin Masters would partner with Sega Toys in order to make a game to play with the Bakugan toys. This is the same Sega Toys that gave the world Dinosaur King. They knew how to make a card game, and from there the idea was solidified. Bakugan Battle Brawlers. Each player takes a team of 3 Bakugan, 3 gate cards, and 3 ability cards, and take turns rolling your Bakugan onto the gate cards. Gate cards are stiff and have metal insides, so when the Bakugan rolls onto it and the magnet makes contact, boom! It pops open and reveals whatever monster's inside. Dragons, birds, tigers, and a lot of other monsters taken from various cultures around the world. You then compare the G-power printed on your Bakugan with the opponent's, apply the bonuses and effects each gate card provides, play ability cards to try to up your G-power, and whoever has the higher amount at the end wins the gate card. First to 3 gate cards wins. Now, it came as a surprise to me when I was younger, but these gate cards and ability cards you collect with the Bakugan, They got words on them. Yeah, you're supposed to play them under a defined rule set and play with other people who also knew the rules. We did things a little different on the mean streets of Massachusetts. If you could get the Bakugan to actually stand, you won. However, that's not the negative you might think it is. Speaking from personal experience, both of myself and the people I played with, the game of Bakugan was kind of a superfluous part of our enjoyment. Bakugan were first and foremost cool figurines you could collect and play with and keep in your pockets. We had fun just trying to get them to stand on the gate cards and trying to knock each other's off, which kept the spirit of the original Marbles game that inspired it in the first place. I don't just think that was a conscious decision on the part of the designers, I think it was integral to making Bakugan as popular as it was. Typical trading card and toy battling games either have defined rule sets and parameters you have to play the game in, or just lack the degree and uniqueness of Bakugan's flexibility. To play Beyblades, you need a stadium to play in, or you're just gonna scuff up chair legs. Yu-Gi-Oh! Needs you to know what a battle phase is, how many normal summons you get, when the game ends, but with Bakugan, it didn't even matter if you could read or understand what the gate card said. They were still little marbles that popped out into a dragon, and that was more than enough for kids like me. Alongside the launch of the toy line was also an animated series, which saw TMS Entertainment, the studio behind Akira, Detective Conan, and Batman the Animated Series, teaming up with Nelvana, the studio responsible for the Donkey Kong Country cartoon, and all the damages that resulted from it. I want compensation. Spin Masters was dead set on making Bakugan a success, and when the franchise would eventually launch in the US in February of 2008, it wasn't a hit, it was a home run. Bakugan was a real innovation in the toy scene, the likes of which hadn't been seen since the heyday of Pokemon. The combination of the cool factor of having action figures you could fit in your pocket, the well-designed game that anyone could learn, on top of a TV show that fleshed out more of the world and gave the toys more personality, Bakugan took the world by storm, and took Spin Masters to the spot of the 5th largest toy manufacturer in the US. By Christmas, it was easily the most popular toy in the country, and reports even talked about Bakugan shelves being sparse and barren, while other toy companies had fully stocked shelves. The next year, in 2009, it was awarded Property of the Year at the North American International Toy Fair, and raked in millions in profits. They outsold Transformers and Star Wars in the toy market. That's how big we're talking. Spin Masters didn't rest on that success either. No, they knew that at its core, it's Baku core, you'll laugh later, this could be a fad or a game people played forever depending on how they played their cards. The Bakugan Ultimate Battle Tour was a touring van that went to Walmarts, Targets, and Toys R Us's that would demonstrate the game and the toy's functionality live to kids and their horrified parents who just found the next thing that would clog the bathroom drain. Then there would be editions made to entice collectors and get people into buying as much product as they could. Chase variants of Bakugan, show-accurate Bakugan for fans who wanted the exact same team as the characters on the show, with loads of accessories like carriers, launchers, and gauntlets like they would use on the show. I had this Bakugan box that you were supposed to store your cards and Bakugan in for forever and a day, and that day was yesterday since I lost it somewhere. And this was all for the first wave of the Bakugan series. Every couple of months, a new expansion to both the brand and the game itself would be introduced. First were the Trap Bakugan. Traps could be dropped in to swap attributes on the fly whenever a Bakugan of the same attribute was played. So a fire trap for a fire Bakugan, light for light, so on and so forth. The expansion that introduced them would also lead to a new season of the anime, New Vestroya, which is something that would persist for the next 2 expansions, Gundalian Invaders and Mectanium Surge. Gundalian's major addition was Bakugear, new pieces like Trap Bakugan that could be used to give your Bakugan a boost, and unlike Trap Bakugan, their implementation was genius. Now new Gundalian Bakugan would have little pegs on their design somewhere, and by slamming down the Bakugear on top of them, they would get battle armor that not only made them stronger, but look so cool. This combination of Dragonoid and these cannons have been on display in my room for years because they just fit together so perfectly. On top of the magnets, now they came with little patches that when you pressed your finger onto them and applied enough heat, would reveal a code that could be used in the online MMO, Bakugan Dimensions. It was a big piece of shit that never worked. Hours and hours wasted trying to get in, my 2011 internet strangled to death, as the brief moments I could get in were immediately ended by another goddamn maintenance patch. My only regret is that when it died the next year, they didn't give it a gravesite for me to piss on. With each of these expansions, though, the build quality of the Bakugan kept improving and improving more and more. Each new set revealed new ways to cram more complex designs into these tiny little things. First that came was the B2 revision, which made the Bakugan much bigger. But if you want to see just how far they've come, just compare the original Dragonoid design to his Gundalian Helix Dragonoid evolution. So much improvement in so little time showed just how much design space there were in these little balls, and the designs that came from them used that space so well. This sort of design brilliance gives these Bakugan so much more staying power, since when you're young, you just like that it looks like a dragon. But getting older helps you appreciate how it looks like a dragon. Mectanium Surge would be the final set of the original series, and boy could you tell that the end was nigh. Metal Bakugan, while nothing new in things like Dual Hydronoid's center ring and the heavy metals of New Vestroia, Mectanium Surge made a huge deal of the die-cast metal that Bakugan would be made with. Commercials would show them mowing down other Bakugan like bulldozers. The whole bottom would be made of the same heavy metal that made Hydronoid and Dragonoid so cool. But when you get your hands on one, you discovered that they made as little of the Bakugan as they could metal, and instead painted the majority silver and kept the metal to stuff like the feet and other dangly bits that didn't really affect much. We didn't lie, we just told as little of the truth as legally possible. Other than Steel Trap Bakugan, which didn't really need the gimmick since they just get plopped down, Mectanium Surge did a little to move the needle back in the right direction, as some lackluster gimmicks and an inflating production cost with deflating player numbers meant that Bakugan had lived out its lifespan. The Bakugan line ended in early 2012, and from there, for many people like me, ended permanently. It was remembered fondly by a lot of people from my generation. My friend group in college was able to bond over how we all spent way too much money on these guys, and they remain a piece of nostalgia I had a lot of fondness for. What I didn't know, however, was that not only had Bakugan kept going when I had stopped looking, it had rebooted itself twice. Now, a lot of the research I've done for the first iteration of Bakugan, or Legacy as it's now called, was done by myself. However, I did actually know quite a bit about the new generations of Bakugan thanks to one man, Jet motherfucking Kuso. This man has two loves in his life, Bakugan and pussy. In that order. Jet Kuso is the best man who has ever lived, and makes content about Bakugan that had me interested in a game I hadn't cared about in well over a decade. His video recapping the launch of the first reboot helped a lot. And while I normally hate supporting the competition, Jet Kuso is not competition. He could smite me at any moment, and I'm simply thankful he hasn't yet. So Bakugan rose out of the grave that apathy stomped it into in 2019, when an invitational was held for content creators, including Billiam, Kimbo, what the fuck? What the fuck?
Alex Simo is one thick bitch. Let me see that progressy.
They would be playing the brand new revision to Bakugan, Battle Planet. Gate cards were out, and in their place were 12 Baku cores, and see, now you're laughing, it's called Setup and Payoff. 3 ability cards became 40 in a deck that you now would draw from like any other TCG, and now the game would play totally different. At first, the wider community hated the change, but after it was showcased how the design space was changed by this revision, people saw it as a change for the better. These cores, and how much smaller they were, meant that the Bakugan could now have their magnets placed anywhere, and opened up the design space to so many new designs. Now suddenly, Bakugan could open up in all sorts of different ways without having a bulky bottom that the magnet would have to be housed in. Now it could be anywhere, and Bakugan was all the better for it. Getting my hands on a few Battle Planet era Bakugan, and yeah, they're pretty cool. The quality has gone up significantly from the Legacy series, the designs are more inventive than ever, and really use the space of the sphere well. And the Ultra Bakugan, a line of larger, heavier-hitting Bakugan, are the most action figure the line has ever felt. Compared to the regular Bakugan, there's no other way to describe them than monsters. Now, folding this monstrosity is a game in and of itself, with the goal being not to break it, but I'd say as far as quality goes, it's really good. The people at Spin Masters, including community manager Ventus Knight and the design team, referred to as Gary and Gary of the team The Garys, were well aware that this revival would bring back in a lot of people and wanted to do something the original Bakugan could never do: create a competitive, organized scene. Big box stores like Walmart and Target are obviously the best distribution model, but for hardcore fans, card shops would be the perfect place to go to. But Bakugan had difficulty setting up a chain of distribution, as well as finding shelf space. Card shop space is always going to be limited by default, because you're not bumping Magic, you're not bumping Pokemon, and you're not bumping Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just not gonna happen. And as for Bakugan, it could be seen as suffering from a key problem that kills any burgeoning TCG: bloat. The more stuff you have to carry, the less likely people are to play, and with the Bakukors and Bakugan themselves, for a lot of people it can be a bridge too far. Then 2020 happened. Sets were delayed or cancelled. It's impossible to blame this on Bakugan, anything they were doing or attempting. The only thing you could really say was that they didn't have a simulator like Pokemon, Magic, or Yu-Gi-Oh! And when they did make one, oh boy. But slowly, as the world opened up like one great big Aquos and Ventus Bakugan, play resumed, in-person events restarted, and distribution became more organized. On top of the best part, a new alternate format that used the newly reintroduced gate cards was formed, which was of course invented by God King Kuso. Hallowed be thy name, thy will be done, thy Bakugan's brawl, as on earth as in Vestroia. Slowly though, Spin Masters would discontinue the TCG side of the game, with the cards no longer being sold in stores, and the gate cards being reintroduced to get the game closer to the Legacy series. The series that died an ignoble death, if you remember. New versions of the Trap Bakugan called Geogon would be introduced that acted as backup Bakugan you could swap into a battle if it didn't suit the one that you rolled out. Geoforce Dragonoid gave the next generation the pleasure of making their parents' life a living hell, as they begged for it like I begged for Maxis Dragonoid. It was a bit confused towards the end, but Bakugan Battle Planet, I think, was a well enough retry at the Bakugan concept. I think Bakugan at its core is a timeless idea like the original design intended. No matter how much time passes, it's always going to be fun to watch the little ball unfurl into a unicorn. And if the concept behind the second reboot was as strong, then maybe it will be this idea that is iterated upon time after time as new creative minds come in to put a new spin on it. Oh, brother. Alright, so 2023 marked the return of Bakugan after a rather short hiatus compared to the last one, flanked again by a new show and a brand new gimmick. Bakukors were officially out, and it's time to bring back just the gate cards. Except where the old ones had the G-Power and effect text, these ones have a child's playmat. What does any of this mean? Well, let's investigate the new cards to see what they have to... God damn it, Postman! Handle with care means handle with care! My Bakugan cards broke! Okay, so this is the first glimpse at that new gimmick. Bakugan cards now come in two halves, a top and bottom, with the top being the actual monster, and the bottom being their weaponry. Each one has these three stats here: red heart, green fire, and blue gunshot wound. This is a neat idea in concept. I remember a game from when I was younger. Fusion Crew had cards that you could link together when you merged the two monsters, so it has appeal. And then the starter pack that I bought had two cards that didn't even match and looked horrible together, and I think I found some of the problems. So the reason the cards are split the way they are is for the new bind mechanic. something partially lifted from Bakutech, a Japanese spin-off of Bakugan. Now every Bakugan can be split in half and have their bottoms replaced with different bases. This severely limits the space that Bakugan can be designed in. Before, with the Ultra Bakugan, or most Battle Planet designs, they'd have a lot of internal mechanisms that took up a lot of space, but they would be able to use that space in fun ways to design Bakugan that folded out in ways you'd never seen before. Here, though, they're literally half the toy they used to be. Compare this Trox toy from the Battle Planet line to the Trox toy of the new reboot. This is about as complex as the first ever line of Bakugan, and even then I feel like I'm selling Serpenoid pretty short. That's because every bottom needs to work with every other top, so you have only half the space that you used to have to work with. You can't do anything with the bottom half of the Bakugan since it isn't sure to still be attached. And of course, tons of Bakugan have had static bottoms, but at least you could admire the designs. These designs are so basic that they really aren't all that appealing. And the quality of the builds themselves have taken a nosedive. What used to be solid and firm now feels like a Happy Meal toy. I hate saying stuff like, they made toys so much better when I was a child, because what they mean is that I was younger when I was a child, which, fair, but holding all three generations, newest is clearly the worst. They also ditched attributes. The color it is doesn't even matter anymore. Now it's all about what race they're from insects to dinosaurs to birds to silly. But the real allure of this line are the brand new Special Attack Bakugan. They come with a ring you can attach, and these are the special weapons that make up the lower halves of the cards. Now you may say, what the fuck? How am I supposed to roll this if he's got his shame cone on to keep him from chewing his stitches? Well, with this ripcord right here, you can spin the Bakugan and launch them onto the gate cards. Oh dear god, there's inbreeding in the toy aisle. So yeah, you see this mechanic and you immediately think it's just Beyblades. Except no, it's actually much lamer. The spinner they use is all internal, as opposed to the external spinning top of Beyblades. That means that while the outer toy can fully stop, it can revive itself if it has enough spin. That's the extent of the cool mechanics though, since after that, the design quickly falls off. They're not designed to clash with other Bakugan like Beyblades, so the weapons are way more for area control than any sort of combat. They aren't launched when you pull the ripcord either, which makes the whole process a lot slower. And the aim of the game is still the same, land on a gate card and compare stats. But the Special Attack Bakugan needing to be spun means that it's impossible to get onto a gate card when it's resting on a table. The spinner doesn't have enough power to get over the tiny lip that's provided by a gate card. In the actual arenas they sell for the game, they have little divots for you to rest the gate cards in to make sure a Special Attack Bakugan can actually participate in the game. And that game? Dumbed down to the point of being idiot-proof. And now you roll your Bakugan onto a gate card, and when two land on the same one, you compare the stats of your Bakugan, using whichever section of the card you landed on. If you land on the red space, you use your heart meter. If you land on a green space, you use your fire meter. And if you land on blue, you shoot the opponent. This adds an element of chance that completely supplants any strategy. Where a Bakugan lands on the gate card used to mean diddly dick. Now it's a key feature that decides the game. If you land on a stat that your Bakugan is weak in, it doesn't matter if you set down the card, you're totally screwed. But if you wanted to add even more randomness to the game, you can play Advanced Format, which has you building a deck of 6 Brawler cards and turning over the top card whenever a battle starts. There's no strategy, there's no skill, and what's worse is that the rule set has no on-ramp to a more complex game. The most complex mechanic is revealing the top card of a deck. After the previous iteration of the game leaned so heavily on the idea of creating a competitive scene for the game, this one goes so far in the opposite direction that the only people who are gonna get anything from this are the youngest of young children. Bakugan at the moment is in a rather tough spot. This is by far the worst of the 3 series, with a bigger bloat problem than ever before, with split-in-half cards, card holders, energy rings and ripcords, with a less interesting game and significantly less interesting designs. fans. With reports of Spin Masters dropping toy profits, citing a drop in Bakugan specifically, this reboot might not be much longer for this world. What the? So the Bakugan reboot is going really, really well, as Spin Master has now released an official rule set to play Bakugan Beer Pong. You launch the Bakugan at a red solo cup, and if it gets in, you win the cup. If two Bakugan get into the same cup, you brawl, I guess. Who the hell is this for? I have been talking way too long about things that exist, so let's move over to what we're really going to be focusing on: video games. Like I said, Bakugan was a multi-pronged attack from Spin Masters, including the game, the show, and of course, Dan Kuso party masks. Would you still love me if I showed you who I really was? Video games were going to play a massive part in this expansion, and as we've already seen with the MMO, they don't even gotta be good. Obviously, Battle Brawlers is the most famous one, but we'll get back to that. Other games include Defenders of the Core, Rise of Resistance, Champions of Vestroia, and finally the Bakugan Battle League. Defenders of the Core is a 3D fighting game from the 6th generation consoles and handhelds, and honestly, it's not half bad. Sure, it ain't half good either, but there's enough smashing big monsters through buildings to carry okay combat. The DS version especially is impressive, since anytime I see 3D models on the DS, I can't help but feel like it's a miracle that it's working. Now, it is clunky. It has a weird stealth overworld for you to explore, and it doesn't even get the original voices back. But to me, it has the same appeal as the Godzilla Pipeworks trilogy. It's simple, but it's charming. When I finally get to make crappy fighting games Evo, this will be a first ballot pick for sure. Rise of Resistance on the DS has gotta be one of the strangest ones of all, seeing as it's an officially released console tower defense game. I know it's a legitimate genre, but since it's so heavily associated with Flash content, seeing it on a console is always gonna feel off, like catching somebody in the shower. Champions of Vestroia is the only one I've never played before, and honestly, it doesn't sound like I'm missing much. The biggest impact this game left was as a stain on a random Nintendo Direct. And if playing Frisbee with your dog, minus the dog, sounds like a great time, looks like you found the game for you. And the Bakugan Battle League is a Roblox game.
Hey kids, it's me, Dan Kuso, of the Battle Brawlers, and I love playing my Dragonoid on gate cards and using ability cards. But my favorite type of cards are your parents' credit cards. Tell me the G-Power total on the back, and don't forget the smaller one off to the side, as well as the expiration month and year. Vestroia needs you!
Please do not steal my Bakugan Roblox codes. Without them, I am nothing. That leaves us with the first and most famous game, Bakugan Battle Brawlers. Released on most devices with a screen, short of flip phones and MP3 players in 2009, Battle Brawlers was published by Activision and developed by Now Productions, a team who either developed or worked as support on the Katamari Damacy series, One Piece Going Baseball, Deadly Premonition 2, as well as Sonic Riders and Mario Super Sluggers. Ah, I see, playing both sides of the fence. The game received about as good of reviews as you could hope for a tie-in game like this. But in terms of sales, it was another smash hit, with the DS version resting as the second most bought game for the console in holiday 2009. This game is one I always remembered wanting as a kid, but a pretty tight game budget meant that I was always looking for something bigger and better than Bakugan if I was gonna spend that kind of money. And by the time I got to where I am now, where absurd amounts of plastic garbage become tax write-offs, the appeal of a Bakugan game was lost on me. But now it's time to see what there is to this, and I'll be playing the Xbox version, as picking the Wii or PS3 is damning yourself to the most hellish experience you can imagine. You'll see why. Beginnen wir mit dem Spiel. Am Anfang des Trailens ist Soisten ein Charakter und... Verdammte Scheiße. Ich habe das Spiel so eingestellt, dass es durchspricht. English. Alright, that's better. The first two things you have to sort out with this game are your character and your gang affiliation. Currently, the extent of what picking your attribute gets you is a differently colored watch, but I'm sure it'll come back sooner or later. After that is character customization, and I'll be damned, it's actually pretty good. There's a decent bit of customization, from haircuts to clothes to accessories, on top of the ability to make a halfway decent OC. Now, I wanted to try to take down Bakugan from the inside, so we're sending in Monsuno to show them that pills are the superior form of monster-holding devices, not marbles. After we're done, we get to see a bunch of stuff that probably makes a lot more sense if the TV show that was airing alongside it didn't stop a decade ago. The rogue Bakugan Naga and Hal G, who just kinda looks like that, use the power of the silent core to continuously disconnect my controller from my Xbox. Meanwhile, in the Doom dimension, the souls of all the Bakugan damned to hell for adultery coalesce into, what else? A dragon, which is launched into our world like all the other Bakugan were. In matters of equal importance, Monsuno is being bullied in the park by the two biggest Season 1 jobbers you've ever met. You got Akira, who could use that strand of hair as a fishing rod in a survival situation, and Shuji, whose harshest swear word is lame-wad. They're accusing Monsuno of making fun of Shuji's brawling style, a crime punishable by death, when who comes to make the save but Dan Kuso himself? Dan's backstory is that he was grown in a lab, with a little bit of every anime protagonist they could find spliced in. He's got Trunks' cut-off jacket, Ash's fingerless gloves, he stole the goggles from any given Digimon protagonist, except Marcus. The man is built for success. He stands up for us and promises to help us learn how to play the game, and from there, it's time to start the tutorial. Now, Battle Brawlers falls into a category I like to call Bakugan games. Whereas the other ones were all the Bakugan tackling different genres, this was the only game released that was meant to be a recreation of the actual game. You and your opponent set out a gate card, and then from there, you can either place down another one, or launch one of your 3 Bakugan. You choose where you launch it, how hard you launch it, and from there, buddy, it's in the Lord's hands. The Lord of Bakugan, that is! Once you launch the Bakugan, you have a degree of control, being able to steer it from side to side, slow it down, or speed it up. You can only do this for as long as you have meter, so it's best to try to suggest the Bakugan in a direction rather than full-on steering it. It does allow for a more dynamic experience though, and gives the game a degree of interactability that the real game could never have. It gets all the more interactive when 2 Bakugan stand on the same gate card, as that initiates one of the 3 different mini-games to earn extra G-power. These are the power, timing, and shooting battles. Remember how I said the Xbox version of the game is the definitive version? Well, the reason for that is the power battles, since the Xbox is the only one of the 3 major consoles without motion controls. Yeah, if you play on the PlayStation 3 or the Wii, you have to waggle your controller to win out in power battles, whereas on the Xbox, you just have to waggle the stick. Timing battles are simply tapping the right button whenever it overlaps with the circle, Hatsune Miku Project Diva Megamix Plus style. And shooting battles suck! I have no idea how it works this poorly, but instead of clicking to the icon you want to shoot, it will always be off by anywhere from a second to an hour. This is the absolute worst of the 3, and I did everything I could to avoid playing it whenever possible. After showing Shuji who the real big dog on the recess field is, we go to buy some more Bakugan, only to realize we're too damn poor to afford a single thing. On our way to go find a paper bag to put over our heads and hide our shame, a Bakugan falls out of the sky and right into our hands. Oh, he's even in my color! This is Leonidas. And if I told you that this guy actually had a lot of interesting history to him, I doubt you'd believe me. So Leonidas is your partner Bakugan for the game. What Dragonoid is to Dan, Leonidas is to you. I really like that they went out of their way to give us a unique Bakugan, never before seen and created for the game. It makes it feel less like we're playing dress-up as the main character and that we're actually a part of the world. Being whichever attribute the player chose as well, gave him the distinction of having no canonical attribute and therefore being factionless, which made him even more distinct. Clearly this role as the game's partner Bakugan meant a lot to people, and it only made sense for him to be released as a real toy eventually. And with certain copies of Bakugan Battle Brawlers came a White Naga, the guy who only shows up in another cutscene and then never again for the whole game. Along with a second game original Bakugan who serves as the bad guy for this game, Leonidas was never made into a real Bakugan for the whole of the Legacy series. Fans tried really hard to let Spin Master know they wanted this, but for one reason or another, he never got made, despite having a toy form for his 3D model in the game. When the Legacy series finally ended, so too did all hopes for a Leonidas toy. But come Battle Planet, and something incredible happened. As in Champions of Vestroia, the Switch game, not only did Leonidas show back up as a central character, but he finally got a real toy made. This makes him the first and only game original Bakugan to ever be made into a real toy, even if he looks nothing like he did in the first one. Now we have our ringer, and we're ready for the real game to start. Now you can play in the park to earn money for upgrades, but what we're really after is that World Championship. And right now, we're sitting at a tidy 900th, 26th place. Leonidas, I think we're gonna need help. Stinglash! This is a neat little guy, pops open to reveal the stinger, decent stats. Alongside Saurus, I think we have a chance in our first tournament. Ref? Judge? Can I report these guys for smurfing? We're playing with Super Soakers and they just brought a shotgun. Once the tournament does start, I decide to put my strategy into play. Stinglash is our goon. He stands on business first and makes sure I always have presence on the board. Leonidas is my ace in the hole. He'll come in and take out anybody to keep them from getting an advantage. And Saurus, he's the sweeper. Anybody left gets mowed down, sometimes very literally. In this game, when you're aiming, you can swap between normal and power shots. And if you land a power shot on a Bakugan, you can drain some of their G-power and get an advantage. As soon as I learned this, I immediately became a strength-build Bakugan player, and aimed for my opponent's brain as often as I could. Did this always work? No. Was it hilarious when it did? Obviously, I just threw a dinosaur at a guy's head. Leonidas takes out Serpenoid, Stinglash beats Terrorclaw, and a double stand with Saurus and Leonidas nets me my very first win with my very own team. Double stands, by the way, are when two of your own Bakugan get onto a gate card at the same time, which automatically wins you the card without a battle. Next is the battle with Runo, who couldn't be trying to insult me anymore if she tried. She uses Chaos Bakugan, the parallel to my Darkus, is ranked number 6 in the world, and yet still brought a particle collider to a science fair, and worse yet, she's got this broke, knockoff, bargain brand Stinglash. I shall sting you asunder. Actually, I have a better idea. You don't deserve to face the mighty Stinglash. So what if while I'm trying to roll, I accidentally press the shoulder button that makes your Bakugan turn around mid-roll, and I don't make it onto a gate card and fail completely? How about that, you bum? Anyway, I won. The final match is against the number 7 ranked player in the world, Marucho, a rich boy who uses Aquos Bakugan. During this battle, I get to see exactly what sorts of trick shots you can pull off when you get control, and honestly, it's a lot of fun. The game controls way better in these segments than you'd expect, even though the controls are still very loose. You're never in full control, but a good brawler knows to let the Bakugan decide where it wants to go. And if it starts falling off a cliff, then you take the reins back. And this little prick, this little bastard, sees a harmless Stinglash just sitting around, minding his own business, and decides to throw his toughest Bakugan at him. Just completely unnecessary roughness. I hope you feel like a big man in this game, you little freak, cause Stinglash is not gonna let this sort of trash stand! I break his bird guy's leg in retribution and clear the first tournament, improving my stock from no-name gutter trash to person seen at a Bakugan event. Dan's happy to see me and Leonidas succeed, but oh, those salty bitches, Marucho and Runo, start talking about how Leonidas is too bad a dude to come from the same loser planet as their dumbass Bakugan, and say he has to be a bad guy. Jealousy's a disease, bitch. Better get better before the next tournament. From here, the game enters its basic loop. We gotta battle our way up through the different tournaments all the way to the number 1 position, with each one representing a different attribute of Bakugan. Our next tournament isn't just an Aquos-themed one, meaning that those Bakugan get a boost while Subterran Bakugan get a debuff, but it's also a tag team tournament, seeing us team up with Dan to fight together. Getting to the arena, and it would appear that the budget was split between Bakugan Arena and Water Park, and they just decided, what the hell. How the tag team tournament works is that you and your partner switch off taking turns, and on top of the regular battle win and double stand rules, you now also have a new loss condition, where if you roll your Bakugan onto the same card that your partner's already on, you lose the turn. The benefit is that if you play right, you can win a game twice as fast, since you still only need 3 gate cards to win. However, you've got so much more to worry about than just the game now, since the field change comes with a whole new dimension to the gameplay. See, before you were playing in what was pretty much a shoebox. Now the stadium is much more open with these little emblems scattered all around that give you more G-power when you knock into them. Now on top of the bonuses from the gate cards and ability cards, you gotta get a lot of G-power from the environment, because the opponent is sure to overpower you by magnitudes if you go in without collecting loads. Now you can lose a round not just by being beaten by the opponent or failing to get onto a gate card, but by ring out. Thankfully, a healthy amount of invisible walls are in play, so you don't need to worry about it too much, but the most G-power points are to be had when you take risks and go down little obstacle courses. These courses can be very inconsistent when it comes to their rules, as this water one ends with you either skipping across and back to the stage, or sinking like a stone. And the difference between what makes a successful run and what makes an auto loss is if the game had a rock in its shoe this morning. Having something like this come down to random chance half the time is frustrating. All the good work you did steering becomes undone, as now you have to wait through 3 other turns before you get a shot. Now, the game doesn't leave you high and dry during those other 3 turns, though. During opponents' turns, you get to beat the biggest piece of shit in the world and open fire on the enemy Bakugan. You can use these little crosshairs to knock the opponent's Bakugan off course. A little bit at a time, but if you keep the jittery sights locked in, then you can really screw them out of a lot of G-power or their entire turn. Now, I'm happy this is here because it makes 3/4 of the game something other than an excuse to check the stock market, but if this happens to me, I'm quitting the game and breaking the disc. It does also mean that you have to watch those 3 turns for a chance to screw them over. Because if you skip the turns and go straight back to your own, the Bakugan they leave out are gonna be astronomically more powerful and you won't stand a chance. I lost my first run at the tournament because I wanted to get to my turn so fast that I got washed by their increased G-power. Overall, battles in these arenas are complicated. I like that they're a lot more game-feeling than the standard arena, I like that there's an incentive to stay engaged for the whole time, and I like the idea of getting more power by exploring the surroundings. Making last-second turns and perfect throws that let you weave between the courses and net you hundreds of points and boosts feels great to pull off. The random chance in some areas and the slippery controls, though, can only leave me saying I think it's a good idea that varies in quality from arena to arena. As for the Aquos one, it's fine. A decent introduction, not much in the way of gimmicks aside from the little side courses, but throw much more at me and I'm gonna start feeling overwhelmed. The tag team format as well is just okay. The fact that it's a 4-way match means that the game takes an excruciatingly long time, and the partner AI can range from trickshot master to half-wit nitwit, as it misses the most basic of shots. Someone I can't blame any of my losses on, though, are my Bakugan. Stinglash is as reliable as ever, Leonidas puts in the work, and the new team edition of Griffin proves that, like it or not, you gotta swap out team members every now and again. Well, except Leonidas and Stinglash. But he's Stinglash. Our run at the tournament ends out with a rematch against Marucho and Runo, and after very slanderous accusations, each member of the team manages to take down an opponent's Bakugan. Leonidas and Griffin take out Marucho's Bakugan, and MVP Stinglash manages to go toe-to-toe with Runo's ace Tigrera, and win, breaching the 1,000-point barrier. We take the victory and thank Dan for the help, but next time we're not gonna have any, as the Subterran tournament is a battle royale, meaning 4 players again, but it's every man for himself. Do I still have Stinglash? Then you can send 100 Brawlers my way and they're all gonna feel the sting! The Sting has recently been informed that these comments were not made in the best interest, as he is a very early game Bakugan and will need all the help he can get. So we're going back to the shops for a tune-up! Now obviously this place is where you buy new Bakugan, but it's also where you get new gate cards, ability cards, and upgrades. Now, gate and ability cards each come in 3 different categories each. For gate cards, you have Gold, Silver, and Bronze. Gold giving specific Bakugan a boost like my Leonidas card, which gives him an extra 200 points no matter what, Silver cards, which are effectless but have the highest attribute boosts, and Bronze cards that have various gameplay effects, like swapping the printed G-power of the Bakugan, or giving bonuses depending on who landed on it first. You can only have one of each card though, so you're not allowed to stack your deck with just gold cards, and figuring out a combo that works the best for your playstyle is super important. Since I needed to rely on Leonidas to finish off tough opponents, I kept his gold card, the highest level darkest booster I could get on the silver cards, and for my bronze card, I used Overpower, which gives a G-Power bonus to whoever has a lead in gate cards. This is because I believe in Stinglash, and to a lesser extent, myself. Ability cards are the same thing, one of each type, red boosting based on attribute, green boosting specific Bakugan, and blue cards needing you to meet certain conditions for your boost, like controlling so many different attributes or being on your opponent's gate card. Upgrades are the most robust thing you can do in the shop though, as you're allowed to spec out individual stats on your Bakugan, improving aspects like its turning speed, how much of a boost it gets, how high it can jump, but my friends are all perfect the way they are. Except in how they can't quite kill efficiently enough. You can just say, screw it, and max out the potential G-power of your Bakugan, but the fact that you can control so much of how your Bakugan plays outside of just how strong it is a really fun feature. Just be sure you know what you want before you spend your points, since you only get 10 upgrades before it can't go any higher. With my deck stacked and my team powered up, it's time to take on the Subterra Tournament Battle Royale. The arena this time around is a lot more manageable. No little courses that take control away, instead you have these little half-pipe bowls where you can charge in at the right angle with enough speed to launch yourself upwards, and gain a whole bunch of G-Power points for doing it, on top of shifting sands that can drag you towards a ring out. Not nearly as much random chance this time, and as such makes this arena a lot more fun. Even if the Battle Royale format does mean games still take a bit too long to get done, but at least now I'm not missing out on a whole nother person to harass with cannon fire. There are also crystals you can smash into for bonuses in the minigames, like stopping your opponent from doing anything or randomizing their point gain, but I've yet to find one that makes the shooting game anywhere near good. The competition gets a lot more fierce as enemy G-Power slowly but steadily rockets out of control, and leaves you without any options besides getting as much as you can as soon as you can and screwing your opponent over for their entire turn. Our final match in the tournament is against Julie, the Subterran Bakugan player, as well as Runo and Marucho, and this fight is even more personal than before. Before the tournament began, I got cornered by all of Dan's friends who told me I wasn't even a real brawler and that my name was Mud. Dude, the Battle Brawlers are dickheads. You're all just bullying me because your ace isn't a dragon. The battle is close, and doesn't have near the amount of Stinglash wins I would have liked, but in the end, I am rewarded with a visit from, Satan. This is Marduk, a brawler who uses dirty tricks like launching his Bakugan at his opponents to knock them out. What a jerk. His Bakugan Vladitor is said to be an ancient warlord locked away, reawakened by Halgi and Naga, and now he wants to take Leonidas from us. Not a chance that's happening, so we challenge him to a brawl. This is where my choice to solely focus on Darkus started to get in the way a little bit, since it meant that we had the exact same gate card bonuses, rendering them moot. That means that if his stats are just naturally higher, or I don't get enough boosts before landing, I'm finished. The first of his Bakugan crumples before Stinglash's awesome might, and against all odds, Griffin is actually able to hold off Vladitor as it ends up coming down to the final death match. Stinglash versus Stinglash. I don't know which one to shoot! This fight adds in the next level of each game as well. Now the rhythm game requires 2 buttons instead of just 1, and the power battle needs you to flick up and down in addition to left and right. With the imposter vanquished, we clinch the tournament, but just barely. We need to power up a lot if we hope to rough it out in the next one. I upgrade Leonidas and max out Stinglash to a tidy 315 G-power. But then I swap out Griffin for the stronger Reaper, and he's got 290 by default before a single upgrade. Well, that just means Stinglash's Moxie is gonna have to carry him through the next few. I also grab a card that forces any minigame battle to become a power battle, because if there's one thing I have more faith in than Stinglash, it's my ability to waggle a stick. Next is the Ventus tournament hosted by Shun. You get everything you need to know about this guy when I tell you his mom is a Bakugan. The Ventus arena is a little more complicated, as the main set piece are these jets of air that rocket you up so you can fall back down and hit G-point emblems on the way. Except getting into this feels like being trapped in a paint shaker. This is far from the worst the game gets when it comes to making me sick, but just know it's a less than enjoyable experience. Luckily, we're back to the one-on-one battles, which means we can get through this tournament in half the time. But the number of players you have to get through to get to the end has been increasing more and more each time. It's an endurance test as their G-power totals keep getting higher and higher, and strategies more comprehensive. Should I use an ability card now? He could be planning something major, but if I gain momentum now, oh god damn it, he's just throwing out Stinglash again. Good old Stinglash, nothing beats it. While I have the chance though, since the game is not changing up much for the next couple tournaments, I'd like to address the game's graphics and how they've aged better than I expected. This was a 2009 tie-in game to a toy that had to release on pretty much every console imaginable, and despite that, the cell shading and artistic choices have given it a style that really stands the test of time. Having the eyes and mouth be little animated bits on the 3D faces is really charming, as well as having the Bakugan be little 3D models like they were in the show. Seeing them fly around too just gives me memories of hiding gate cards under my shirt so I could have them sit on my shoulder like they do in the show, and that just makes me happy. Another area this game impresses in that I never expected was the music. It was a real shock to hear, but this game's soundtrack is pretty killer. More than a few tracks were the exact right energy I was looking for this competitive marbles game to make it feel like it was life or death. And I even listened back to a few on their own outside of the game. The production values on this game are just so much higher than I expected. Fully modeled ball and monster forms for over 30 Bakugan, attack animations, defeat animations, a bunch of characters have a lot more work that went into them than I could have ever expected. At the end of the tournament is Shu, and even with his best Bakugan, he can't... Stinglash, what's wrong? Stinglash! You're gonna pay for that. Let me embarrass you in front of your mom and see how... Stinglash, snap out of it! You're gonna lose! Stinglash! No. No, Stinglash strongest there is! Leonidas, take this home, we're done here! A heavy layer of suppressing fire later, and we prepare for the next tournament, and... Fuck. I know Stinglash would never ever give up on me unless I made him, but I saw how he was doing in that last tournament, and I've known for a while, but I couldn't bring myself to say it, because if I say it, then it's real. I can't keep embarrassing him like this, it's not fair. I'm sorry, Stinglash, you have to understand, the new guy, he's not taking your place, he's just taking your space. Thank you. Thank you so much for everything you've done for me, Stinglash. I love you. Going into battle doesn't feel right without him. But for Leonidas, and Reaper, and our new friend Laserman, I can't wallow in the past. Stinglash didn't take me this far just to bail out now. I can't become the world champion with Stinglash, so I'm gonna become the world champion for Stinglash! Now, these last two arenas, Pyrus and Chaos, I don't think I've made it clear yet that I actually like this game. Honestly, both in the context of what it is, a 2009 tie-in game to a TV show, and as a game on its own, I actually like it. I complain about stuff like the steering and the fact that you have to watch so many other people having fun, but I made it this far into the game, so it must be doing something right. The main gameplay loop of battling and collecting cards is fun. The battles have at least a little strategy to them to keep you engaged, and you have to put in some actual thought into things like team composition and deck building. The arenas you fight in are varied enough to make it feel like each one is a different experience, and they're visually distinct enough so it feels like you're not stuck in the same spot doing the same thing over and over again. The presentation is well above anything I expected. The game has a killer soundtrack, and it captures the feeling that I wanted from a game like this really, really well. Collecting Bakugan and using them in battles is fun and rewarding. Seeing them fight the opponents is satisfying, and even if the story is very the player's self-insert is here now, let's focus on him, it's a cute enough little story about trust and friendship that I like to see. Okay, I say all this to say that the last two stages aren't very good. Alright, so the first thing, they're long. Like, really long. 2 hours long. The others could be done in half that time, and that's while I was recording every single battle. When I finally started pausing my recording and restarting when interesting stuff started happening, it was still way too much time. The Chaos Arena is real bad for this, since it has a lot of automated sections that make for boring time wasters, whether you're attacking or defending. Speaking of which is the stage gimmicks. The Pyrus Arena has these little courses warded off by these launchers that you have to jump into. And wouldn't you guess, all my Bakugan are crappy jumpers. It never came up before or after this, so I felt like the devs put in a jump stat, realized it never really came up, and then just raised the launchers high enough that you couldn't reach them without a good jump stat. Then when you do get on the course, it's switching between rails to avoid falling in the lava. But the game does a really bad job showing if you're gonna fall off or not. You'd think that just switching between the grooves in the track would be enough, but no, even switching rails makes it so you fail. You have to hammer in the opposite direction so you're on the other side of the pit, but the game doesn't really communicate that to you. The floor is also covered in lava that drains your G-power if you touch it, so if you're really unlucky, you'll land on a gate card with less power than you have printed on your Bakugan. Oh, but Chaos takes what doesn't work in the Pyrus Arena and takes it in bold new creative directions. So other arenas have had minor built-in environmental gimmicks, like the earth shaking in the Subterra stage, the wind blowing in the Ventus stage. Here the gimmick is these Tigrera statues that will roar and shake the screen. This is done with a sickening pulsating effect that looks harmless at first, but around the fourth time I experienced that calming tranquility of what felt like a thumb pressing down on the back of my eyeball. Yeah, I got a migraine from looking at this effect. And for a tournament that has you run through pretty much every important character in the game, I was suffering badly. I actually had to take breaks. When a game puts that at the start, it's with a wink and a nudge. And with how long it is and how little the stage changes between rounds, you're gonna route out a path by the end of Fight 2. After that, it's just doing the same route over and over and over again so you get the most G-power, and that gets old really, really quick. With the annoying screen effect every 15 seconds too, it made this last tournament, the longest in the game, by far the worst part. On top of that was the fact that the Chaos Arena made it so all my darkest Bakugan have a disadvantage, and don't gain half as much G-power as they normally do. But hey, we toppled the Battle Brawlers, Masquerade, and even Marduk, as now we're officially the best brawler in the world. Sadly, Marduk doesn't get the message that the game's over and tries to pay me back for knocking his Bakugan off course every single time he threw it and never letting him play the game. Vladitor transports all of us to the Doom Dimension and steals the Silent Core to power up into his final form, Axe Vladitor. Since we're essentially in Bakugan Hell, everybody's powerless and can't even stay standing as their power is drained. But Leonidas was born in the Doom Dimension, so he's able to absorb the power from the other brawlers and evolve into Omega Leonidas, as it's time for the one-on-one battle in the darkest arena. Thank God the gimmick here is that there's no gimmick, and you just have to beat Vladitor 3 times in a row to win. Now, you get a pretty hefty boost in the evolution from Leonidas to Omega Leonidas, but that doesn't mean jack squat when Vladitor just finished a much more impressive power-up. We don't even benefit from the darkest boost in the arena, since, guess what, he gets the exact same boost. After all my hard work, he still outpaces me by 80 points, which is a lot when he boots up to nearly 1,000 without an ability card. If you perform well enough at the minigame, save your cards for the right moment, and gather as much energy as you can actually pull off a win in what's a pretty fun boss battle. Once Vladitor is defeated and the Doom Dimension put back into check, both him and Leonidas begin to fade away. Funny, losing my best friend actually prepared me for something like this. We offer Marduk the friendship he never had, even though he's still wearing the evil mask, and leave the Doom Dimension together without our partners. Except not soon after, look who falls right back into our hands! It's Leonidas! Turns out that Vladitor wasn't so bad after all, and gave Leonidas the last of his power so he could survive and come back. We live happily ever after, and while it looks like the game has ended, it's actually still opening up, since now you can do loads of post-game tournaments with different conditions. But even if I did enjoy the game, I think I've had my fill of marbles for the time being.